Henry Ford was an incredible person who showed us that with determination and hard work, we can achieve our dreams. His life story is a true inspiration, and learning about his journey can motivate us to chase our own goals and make a difference in the world. Henry Ford was born in 1863 on a farm in rural Michigan, near Detroit. He always loved machines and was given a pocket watch when he was just 15. People soon recognized him as a talented watchmaker. Soon after his mother passed away, Henry Ford left his family's farm to find work in Detroit. He worked hard and eventually became an engineer at the Edison Illuminating Company. In 1893, he reached the impressive position of chief engineer and earned the recognition and support of Thomas Edison. Henry Ford always had a deep affection for Thomas Edison, which lasted his whole life. While working as the head engineer at Edison's company, Henry Ford got the chance to tinker with a gasoline-powered quadricycle. His experiments went well, and he turned that quadricycle into a small car. In the late 1890s, he decided to leave the Edison Illuminating Company and start his own car company. In 1903, the Ford Motor Company was founded with the support of various investors who put in $28,000. Henry Ford worked really hard to make a better car. They made several models like the Model A, B, C, F, and N before they created the famous Model T in 1908. The Model T had some quirks, like no speedometer, starter, oil gauge, a strange gear system, different sized wheels, and headlights powered by a dynamo. But it was very affordable. Over time, Ford kept improving how they built cars, making it more efficient, which meant they could make more cars at a lower cost. In its very first year, the Model T car found 10,607 buyers. Over the next 5 years, more and more people wanted it, and by 1914, a whopping 250,000 Model T cars were being made, making Henry Ford a profit of $27 million. By 1921, they were making a massive 1.25 million cars. The Model T, with all its quirks, was loved by regular folks and farmers. It wasn't just for rich people anymore, everyone could afford one. People trusted it so much that some farmers even turned it into a tractor. Ford's assembly line, though highly efficient, had some problems. The work was repetitive, and workers had limited breaks, making them feel tied to their jobs. Because of this, many workers left their jobs, and it was hard to keep them. But Henry Ford came up with a brilliant solution. He raised the wages to an incredible $5 a day, much more than what others were paying. This not only stopped workers from leaving but also made their earnings better than before. Some rich people criticized him for paying too much, but Ford explained that higher wages helped the workers afford the very cars they were building. It was a win-win situation. It was Henry Ford who changed the way things were made. He helped create the assembly line, a way to build things faster and cheaper. While he didn't come up with the idea, he used it really well, making it super successful. Because of this, he decided to give customers the choice of any color they wanted for their cars, as long as it was black. The reason they stuck with black was that it dried quickly, which made it the cheapest option. The assembly line made the Model T car cost less, and it made Ford the biggest car company. In 1932, people thought that Ford was making 33% of all the cars in the world. Henry Ford played a big part in starting the motor company, but he also relied on his Canadian partner, James Couzens, to help with running and selling the cars in the early days. Couzens was really good at business, but Ford and Couzens didn't always get along. Ford didn't like that Couzens was getting paid a lot, $150,000 a year in 1914. In 1915, Couzens decided to sell his share and leave the company. Ford's company kept growing, but in the 1920s, other car companies like General Motors and Chrysler started to challenge Ford's position. They made cars that were just as efficient as Ford's but had some cool features, like cars with automatic starters. By the mid-1920s, Ford's share of the car market started to go down. In the 1920s, Henry Ford got interested in things outside the car industry. He got really curious about soybeans and how they could be used to make different kinds of food. Then, in 1927, he took on a big project in Brazil. He didn't like relying on rubber from the British Empire, so he wanted to grow his own rubber in Brazil, near the Amazon rainforest. He had big plans to create a perfect plantation and town. But, sadly, the project turned out to be very expensive and had a lot of problems. It was really hard to grow rubber in Brazil, and many workers faced difficult conditions, leading to a high number of deaths. It didn't work out as he hoped. Henry Ford was famous for paying his workers well, but he really didn't like labor unions. He fought against them for a long time and didn't want anything to do with them. He even hired a tough guy named Harry Bennett, who was known for being ruthless in stopping people from forming unions. In 1932, things got really bad when Bennett's men shot and killed 5 workers at Ford's River Rouge complex. In 1937, a great leader named Walter Reuther began giving out pamphlets at the Ford factory in Michigan. The message was simple: let's have unions, not just Ford's way of doing things. But Ford didn't like this, so he sent his tough guys to beat up Reuther and other union supporters. This time, though, journalists saw what happened, and it became known as the Battle of the Overpass. People were shocked by the violence and started supporting the workers who wanted to join unions. Jump to 1941, the workers went on strike again. Ford's wife convinced him to agree to the United Auto Workers, UAW, and let the workers have their unions. Henry Ford really didn't like war. In 1915, he did something remarkable: he helped fund a ship that was all about peace and sent it to Europe. He also spoke out against what he called rich people who support wars. In simple words, he wondered why some wealthy folks worked so closely with the military to start and benefit from wars. He believed they were just interested in making money from wars, even though it made it hard for regular people to find good jobs and earn fair wages. Ford also asked a thought-provoking question: what would happen to these war makers when the wars were over and there was no more need for them? Before and during the Second World War, like many Americans, Henry Ford believed that his country should stay out of international conflicts. Even when the attack on Pearl Harbor happened, he still didn't directly participate in the war effort. However, he allowed other officials in the Ford company to turn it into one of the biggest makers of military planes during the war, which was a significant contribution. Henry Ford usually didn't join any political party. But in 1924, Woodrow Wilson convinced him to run for the Senate as a Democrat. He didn't win, and after that, he didn't get involved in politics again. Henry Ford had some controversial beliefs. He read anti-Semitic pamphlets, and in the 1920s, he bought his own newspaper and turned it into a magazine. However, this magazine didn't become popular because it had articles that were not interesting to most people. But Ford didn't give up. He kept putting money into the magazine and even promoted it at Ford car showrooms all over the country. The magazine published articles that unfairly blamed Jewish people for controlling the media, Hollywood, and even cheating in the 1921 Baseball World Series. What's puzzling is that Ford thought it was okay not to have any personal prejudice against individual Jewish people. He even had a good Jewish friend, Albert Kahn, who designed his factories. But at the same time, he held political views that were unfair and biased against Jewish people. But in 1927, Ford's magazine got into trouble. A Jewish lawyer named Aaron Shapiro took Ford's magazine to court because they had said bad things about him in a very unfair way. The case went to trial, and Ford had to come to court to talk about it. But just a day before he was supposed to speak in court, he had a serious car accident, so they had to delay the trial. Before the trial could start again, Ford changed his mind. He sent a letter saying sorry, agreed to pay the legal costs, and promised not to say bad things like that again. As a result, they had to close the independent magazine, and it cost Ford $5 million. Ford stopped making public anti-Semitic statements after this, but some people think that maybe someone else in his company wrote the apology letter for him. In private, though, he still held and shared his anti-Semitic beliefs. Adolf Hitler really looked up to Henry Ford and even had a picture of Ford in his room. Ford is the only foreign person mentioned in Hitler's book, Mein Kampf. Hitler wanted the Volkswagen car to be made like how Ford made his cars. In 1938, Ford received a big honor from Nazi Germany, the Grand Cross of the German Eagle, which was a very important award. But despite this, Ford had doubts about Germany becoming too focused on the military, as he told the New York Times in an interview. Henry Ford believed strongly in the idea of honest hard work, saving money, and always striving to become better. He's famous for some of his inspiring quotes that talk about the importance of working hard and relying on oneself. Towards the end of his life, Henry Ford spent a lot of time with his friend Thomas Edison, who had moved to West Orange, New Jersey. Ford once said that he was never really interested in making a lot of money, and this thrifty attitude stayed with him throughout his life. He didn't like spending too much on himself. Ford grew up in the Episcopalian Church, but he wasn't very religious. He believed in reincarnation, thinking that it takes many lives to become good at things. When it came to religion, he thought it was more important to live a good life than to spend too much time studying it. Henry Ford's life story can motivate us in a simple way. He teaches us the value of working hard and never giving up, even when things get tough. He also shows that it's important to be inclusive and help others, just like he did with his employees and his charitable work. Ford's ability to adapt and learn from his mistakes is a great lesson too. He reminds us that life should be balanced, with a focus on experiences rather than just studying. Overall, Henry Ford inspires us to follow our dreams, work hard, improve ourselves, and make the world a better place.